The prison boss narcissist, the intimate partner's primary source, speaks. Part 3. Hello, I'm H.G. Tudor. I'm providing you with a breakdown of an interview that has taken place with the male victim of a female narcissist who's now currently in prison. Not only does this bring light to the dynamic that occurs, but it also enables people to understand that naturally there are male victims that suffer both emotional, psychological, financial, but also physical violence as a consequence of the behaviour of a female narcissist. This analysis is also instructive in terms of allowing you to understand the mindset of the victim and to allow me to explain why he thinks and feels in the way that he does. Richard Spencer faced years of abuse as he was in the sustained devaluation from his narcissist wife, Cherie. He's now explaining about the violence that he was subjected to. When it got to February 2014, so they'd been together for some 14 years, so he's well within the sustained devaluation, they had been trying IVF, and he noted that when the third cycle of IVF failed in February 2014, her violent explosions increased. This will have part, of course, been as the fact that she couldn't conceive, or at least have a child, would mean that her sense of control was being repeatedly threatened, and in the circumstances, this then meant that she had to take this out on him, because she blamed him for these failings. This was also, of course, done to assert control over him. Violence increased so much so that in April, Richard was admitted to A&E, accident and emergency, for those who are unfamiliar with it, requiring stitches after Cherie smashed a wine glass on his head, physical violence, direct assertion of control. Yet again, he made excuses, demonstrating the fact that whilst he's suffering severe verbal and physical violence towards him, he still doesn't leave, such is the grip that his emotional thinking has upon him. He felt that she lashed out through disappointment, rather than realising that he was dealing with a narcissist. He explained, "I thought a baby was going to answer our problems." This is a relatively common response of an intimate partner primary source victim to a narcissist. Their eldest child was eventually conceived in 2015 during their 6th cycle of IVF. Her birth was, says Richard, amazing. He fell in love with his daughter the moment he held her. However, his joy was short-lived. When they came back home, things deteriorated. Nor did a move to a larger property, a 7-bedroom house near York, ease the strain. Again, notice that he's probably saddling himself with significant financial cost as a consequence of trying to placate her, but it's not working. She really started attacking me a year after we moved, when our daughter was about 14 months, he says. It would go on over a period of hours. She'd attack me, ignition of heated fury, physical violence, and then sit back down. I'd try to placate her. Then she'd get back up and start hitting and punching me again. Eventually, she'd go to sleep on the playroom floor because she'd been drinking. Once again, the presence of alcohol was exacerbating the extent of the inability to maintain control over her ignited fury, resulting in Mr. Spencer being on the receiving end of many, many beatings. When she got angry, he explains, one of the ways she used to hurt me was smashing my laptop on the floor. Once she picked one up and put it straight in the washing up water. I probably got through 5 or 6 laptops, so I used to hide them. Destruction of property, triangulation with object. That was about the time when she began to threaten me about our daughter. She said she was going to smash her face in the mirror and cut it, then call the police and say I'd done it, so I wouldn't be able to see her. Use of threat, triangulation with child. So I started gathering the recordings from the camera in the playroom and took photographs of my injuries, because I thought I needed to protect myself. Now, Mr. Spencer is starting to exhibit the use of logic. Still in my mind, I wanted us to be together. So notice here the disconnect. On the one hand, he's compiling evidence of what has happened to him, but he still won't leave. And of course, his emotional thinking is corrupting his sense of loyalty, because he states, I really love the family unit. We had one embryo left. Cherie didn't want our daughter to be an only child. I rationalised in my mind, if we have another baby, we'll get through this. It's crazy, isn't it? Now looking back, with reduced emotional thinking, he can see that the way that he was thinking at the time really wasn't logical. Their middle daughter was conceived during the first cycle of IVF. Within 4 months of her birth, Cherie was pregnant again with a child they conceived naturally. Cherie had always wanted 3 children, and once she was born, that's when I now know they call the discard phase began, says Richard, who has read goodness knows how many articles about narcissistic behaviour. Notice that he's starting to get clued in here, that he's accessed some material about narcissism, but I would suggest that he probably hasn't gained the full understanding of what truly has happened to him, given what he's been saying, and he would certainly benefit from accessing my work. She wanted the house, wanted the kids, and wanted me to pay maintenance, sense of entitlement, residual benefits. She whispered in my ear, "You'll never win, watch this." She'd open the bedroom window and shout, "Richard, stop it, you're hurting me, don't hit me." Then she'd shut the window and say, "I told you, you'll never beat me, I'm much cleverer than you." Notice there that although that seems particularly calculated, it was happening in the moment. She hadn't plotted ahead to do that, but he had threatened her control, and what she did in that moment was open the window and make it seem like he was attacking her. The violence and drinking escalated. For days on end, Cherie would lie on the sofa drinking as much as 3 bottles of wine a day. Lack of accountability for her behaviour. Fuel substitute. At 3 a.m, she would slap Richard awake, physical violence, sleep deprivation, and make him drive to the garage to get more. At night, when I was alone in bed, either in pain after being beaten with a bottle or completely demoralised, I'd imagine a switch on the wall and that it could end all the pain and the feeling of hopelessness. I'd visualise getting out of bed, pressing the switch, and the darkness turning into pure light. Nothing else would exist, just the bright, warm light, and I would be absorbed into it. I felt guilty I'd become estranged from my family and thought it might be easier for them if I wasn't here. Then I thought about the sadness they would feel if I was gone and how it would affect my children. So I knew I'd never get out of bed and press that switch, no matter how bad things got. Today, Richard's home is a warm, calm place with photographs of the girls and their paintings from school on the walls. Goodness knows how their young lives would be if Tony, an old dear friend of Richard's who worked as a military policeman, hadn't intervened one night and alerted the authorities. Notice that Richard didn't understand what he was dealing with and has taken the intervention of a third party. Tony, who Richard hadn't seen for several years, had gone to the family's home following a drunken phone call from Cherie, who called to say that she was being abused. Smearing, telling of lies. When he arrived, Richard finally confessed the truth, sharing with Tony his disturbing video footage and images of his injuries. Tony said, "I've got to do what I think is best for you as a friend and for the kids. Even if you hate me now, I hope in the future you'll think it's for the right reason," I said. "You do what you have to do." Cherie was on the sofa in a state of semi-undress when officers arrived at the house later that night to arrest her. Their eldest daughter, woken by the noise, wandered downstairs and saw the police. I took her to the spare room and sat with her while Cherie got some clothes. My daughter was stood at the window and could see her mum being put in the police van. Tears choke him now as he thinks of his children's suffering, once again evidencing his emotional empathy. When the police came back that night to take a statement, I made excuses for Cherie. Again, typical behaviour of a victim. They were so empathetic. All the fears I'd had about not being believed disappeared, but I'd spent half of my lifetime trying to rationalise her behaviour. It was natural for me to defend her, even to the police. The following day, 2 officers and a social worker arrived to inform Richard that Cherie was being charged. The scales finally dropped from Richard's eyes when he was told of her reaction to a video the police showed her when she threatened Richard with a knife. They told me they played her a video, first without sound, of her telling me she was going to burst my car tyres because I'd looked at her in a certain way. Threat to control, response to nullify that threat to control. She'd gone outside, cut the tyre, destruction of property, and came back, holding the knife which she held against my neck. She watched it and said, "Okay, so what's happened is I've got a knife because I've been telling him I want a divorce and that he may as well kill me if he won't give me one. I'm trying to hand in the knife because I can't take it anymore." Delusion, blame shifting. They then played the video with the sound and asked her, "Have you got anything to say?" She just shrugged and said, "There's not much I can say, is there?" Notice she's still not admitting that she is at fault. I thought when she saw the video she wouldn't believe she was capable of that and would get very upset, but the police said she never showed any emotion, absence of emotional empathy, lack of remorse, lack of guilt. I knew then her whole life was a tapestry of lies. In total, Richard handed police 36 videos, 9 audio recordings and 43 photographs of the abuse. Cherie was charged and issued with a restraining order. I felt like an elephant had got off my back, said Richard. I could breathe. I rang my dad. He came straight over, my youngest sister and stepmom. They were crying and hugging me. They'd only seen my eldest 2 daughters a couple of times and never met my youngest, so it was partly a reunion and partly traumatic. Again demonstrates the behaviour of the narcissist in keeping other family members away from children. His family have been nothing but supportive since. I don't know if they feel they should have known. We haven't talked about it. We might one day, but how was anyone to know? It hurts me that this has affected so many people, exhibiting again his emotional empathy. Richard accepts it will take many years, if ever, for his mental scars to heal. For now, he wants only to give his lovely daughters the calmest, most stable 2 years he can before their mother is released from prison. I've been struggling because everyone has been so kind, it's overwhelming, he admits. There was no kindness with Cherie. I can still hear the girls crying and want to show them life shouldn't be like that. They're flourishing in a safe, secure home. It's what they deserve. A useful breakdown of the perspective of the victim to the abuse that he suffered, showing you many aspects of the dynamic between narcissist and intimate partner primary source as he then was. He's now the former IPPS, and also the way that his emotional thinking affected him. I'm H.G. Tudor. Thank you for listening.